Welcome to our show. We appreciate who you are. We appreciate all the positive compliments we get for what we are doing, and we are growing and growing here. Paul Wellstone said we all do better when we all do better, and that is the focus of our show here at Barbershop Talk. Just to get you in the know, you should already know, but let's remind you, we have our first annual Barbershop Talk and Barbershop Social Services calendar, leadership calendar. There are two focuses of that calendar. One is to fundraise. We wanted to be a part of making our community better, other than doing our show and the various things that we do, and make sure that we are donating to local organizations as they make a difference with our clientele and with our community. So the proceeds from this calendar that will go to Seeds of Wisdom Academy. It's a Black-owned and operated academy and daycare here in the community. It's been making a difference in lives for the longest, and we want to definitely support that entity as it's doing great things in our community. And then also the proceeds go to what we are doing here at Barbershop and Social Services and Barbershop Talk South Minnesota. We are going, we are growing, we are grassroots, but as you know, as we grow, we need to add different cameras and different things, so we need to begin to fundraise and do different things to make us bigger and better for what we do. So please make sure you buy a calendar, and again, it goes to two great causes, and it will make a difference in our community. The second thing I wanted to make sure you know about this community, this calendar, is we wanted to make sure that we have positive imagery about our African American people and minorities in our community. Often, as the media does, and it is what it is, we're not blaming the media, we often don't see positive images of who we are as Black people, as minorities, and as voiceless folks. So that is the focus of this calendar as well. So make sure you buy one, and we are asking you to buy one. All 450 or so people that have liked us as we continue to grow, we want all 450 of you to buy a calendar, as this money will go to a good cause. So please jump in.
At Greenhouse Graphics, we offer award-winning design services at affordable rates to help your business attract customers and ultimately affect your bottom line. Working with you one-on-one at whatever stage you're at in developing your brand. I want to help drive success to your business with excellent design and quality marketing materials. From startup companies in need of custom graphics, websites, logos, to seasonal maintenance, I got you covered. I take time and listen and care about your needs. I understand that image and quality mean everything in business when it comes to leaving a lasting impression on your clients and customers that lasts a lifetime. With nearly 2 decades of experience, it is in my DNA to create eye-popping graphics for your business. Greenhouse Graphics, making sure you always look your best.
All right, Barbershop Talk, what's happening? Look to my left. Yes, I'm nervous. Moms and Man Action is here. We're going to get into it thick with them. But we want to thank you for tuning in on our Saturday show. We want to start from the jump to promote here on the first day of Black History Month, our leadership calendar here in South Minnesota. This calendar was created for 2 reasons. To fundraise for a local organization, we wanted to reach outside of this medium And our goal here this year is to help out Seeds of Wisdom Academy. It's a local Black-owned and operated daycare and school in this area, historic to this area. A lot of kids have grown up through that academy and program, if you didn't know about it. So part of our funds go to that, and then another part of the fundraiser goes to Barbershop and Social Services. What we do here, we are going and growing, and we're trying to add to what we do in our second season. So part of the fundraising, or the money that is raised for this, goes to that. Our second reason for this calendar is the very reason why we have Black History Month in the first place, is to have positive imagery of minorities and certainly African Americans and their contributions to Minnesota and America. That's what this calendar is all about. We have 12 individuals that have sacrificed to jump on this calendar and expose themselves, 12 local leaders, and we want this to be a positive thing for our community, particularly for our kids. The Three Doctors documentary, if you haven't seen that, watch that this Black History Month. Promoted this quote: "Children cannot aspire to be what they cannot see." And that is the whole idea behind this, not only for children, but adults. Getting the positive imagery of our folks out there, of minorities out there, to show not all the bad images that come across the television screen and otherwise are what minorities and certainly African Americans are about. So get in on this calendar. It is $20 if we give it to you in person, or $25 if you order over PayPal and we send it to you. Those should be in here toward the latter end of this week, or actually today or next week, and we'll start distributing those this coming week. So happy Black History Month. Use this month to not only celebrate Black history, but all minority history this month, but certainly Black history. So thank you for tuning in. Also, another announcement, or I need to give a couple of shout outs. This Friday, the Public Defender Office had a training that was around illicit bias, diversity, cultural competency, and that was an outgrowth of what we do here. And it was basic connections, talking to my boss. I do work for the Public Defender Office, about folks in the community that could help with that training. And so we had Angie Porter. She is she grew up here, but now she's a lawyer and works at the U of M in the cities. We had Dr. Shar Kunkel from Luther College and Dee Sobel from the Diversity Council to come out and do our cultural competency training for the Public Defender Office. And I wanted to give a shout out to them, and also the NAACP's W.C. Jordan and Barbara Jordan for coming as well. It was a great event. We learned a lot, and I just want to thank you for that. Of course, it was focused on the Public Defender Office and criminal justice, but that connection basically came through what we do here. At Barbershop Talk, we are not just about putting pretty faces on our screens. This is what's to my left. I'm not talking about myself, but we are about the community, and that was an outgrowth of the community. So we want to thank Dr. Shar Kunkel again, Dee Sobel, Angie Porter, W.C. Jordan, and Barbara Jordan for coming out and helping our training. By the way, we can help out with other things with that as well. So again, thank you for tuning in. Let's get into it with Keep It 100. Ladies, we're going to put you on the spot. You don't have to jump in. Okay. Well, you have to jump in. The other co-hosts are not here. So let's go Super Bowl. It's coming up tomorrow. Big Super Bowl, 49ers against Chiefs. Ladies, what is your favorite Super Bowl dish, if you have one? Ooh. Hit you up strong right away.
Yeah. Nachos is big at my house.
Nachos?
Wings. Buffalo wings.
Buffalo, there you go. What you got? What you got? Ooh, confusion. It's okay. It's okay. It's a tough
There's
show.
too much.
Yeah.
Too much to think about.
Because I spent 10 years in Kansas City, and
Oh, there it is. There it is.
and we had so much Super Bowl food.
Oh,
Hard to
I'm a
think.
Buffalo Wings person, as I said with the governor. Okay. Halftime show. Gotta go there if you're into halftime shows.
Yeah.
With the governor, we went with Prince.
Ooh, that's the answer.
That's the answer?
So
Ooh, come on, yeah, bring it.
I know.
The governor had to say Prince.
I have
He's
lived
the
in
governor.
Minnesota my entire life, and I love Prince, but Beyonce.
Oh, there we go. Bringing it.
I know.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anything?
Favorite halftime show?
No.
No.
Okay.
You left
All
your
right, we
opinions
got
at
Timberlake,
home.
we got YouTube, we got Chubby Checker. Well, that's aging myself. We got all kinds of them. So think about that. All right. Now, ladies, who are you going to choose for the Super Bowl? Chiefs or 49ers? Let me know. Tough decision. Yeah.
Chiefs.
Chiefs, bam!
Yeah. I think 49ers, but same.
Yeah,
Okay.
And I'm going with 49ers because of the
Okay.
defense, and I said that before. Don't hate me for that. I want the Chiefs to win, but hey, we'll see.
Hey, Mahomes has a Minnesota connection.
He does?
His dad was a pitcher for the Minnesota Twins.
Oh, that's what's up.
Yeah.
No, I'm not a Minnesotan, so
I think you are Minnesota.
Yeah, now you are.
Oh, yeah, I've been here a while. Oh, yeah, okay. All right, ladies, our last topic is on a huge issue here nationally. Tragedy that happened to our country. Many don't see it that way, but that is the passing of Kobe Bryant, his 13-year-old daughter, and then 7 other victims, as I understand it, last Sunday. It has gotten a lot of news, so on and so forth. And I just wanted to mention one, and this is the, I guess, the keep it real segment of it. A lot of folks remember when Kobe Bryant was accused, and I don't know if I can say acquitted, but there was a civil suit and he kind of got off.
I think she got a lot of death threats and had to move 5 times.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then they settled.
Yeah, yeah. So they settled on that, and so as I was looking on Facebook and all the different accolades he was getting, there were certainly those folks who were saying, wait a minute, why is this individual getting all these accolades and how great he was and so on and so forth when this happened? And I was like, wow, that's interesting. And the Me Too generation, which really was supportive of women and so on and so forth. What do you think about that? And being women yourselves and this issue, which is valid, this entertainer, blah, blah, blah. If you know anything about Lakers, there are a couple of athletes that have bragged about their promiscuous pursuits, if you will. What do you think about that?
So I actually think this situation is a really great topic to talk about, because I think you can feel awful for these families and the loss of life. And I think that it's a very real thing when you look up to someone as a role model, and he was a legendary basketball player and a role model for many people.
Right.
And I think you feel real loss, even if you've never met him, right? But I think you can do that and at the same time make space for survivors that maybe didn't feel, or domestic assault survivors, that didn't feel comfortable even pursuing charges because the person who committed the crime against them was a community leader.
Right.
So I think you can do both, right? And I think this is a good example of where, like, not everything needs to be like all villain or all superhero. We can have mixed feelings and live in this nuanced middle, right?
Right. Any other thoughts?
I would agree. I think, and that ties into some of probably what we'll talk about later, is, you can kind of hold 2 things in your mind at the same time. Both can be true. And I mean, certainly a tragic loss, and I just think about certainly those families, and it's just tragic. And, and people do feel connected. When you with a celebrity, you feel like you know them, and people have connected. So there's certainly a loss there.
Right. And I think people need to keep in context, and this is certainly coming from Donovan Bailey. We do live in a celebrity culture. This individual was certainly a celebrity. He was a father. He did re-up, if you will, on being a father and a husband and all those things, and he lost his daughter, right? And a lot of other people were lost. So I think, obviously, folks in America resonate with that. And then culturally, and this might be up for debate if you guys want to chime in, if you don't, African Americans and certainly minorities, when they see a leader, particularly when blacks have been villainized and so on and so forth, and add in when we've seen folks in the majority culture get off for certain things and so on and so forth, it is very true that we're much more forgiving in our communities, and we know what it takes to be a Kobe Bryant. We celebrate that we have some leaders out there. And certainly within our communities, we're willing to forgive him for that, and move on to bigger and better. And certainly as we talk about reentry, and a lot of our topics talk about folks getting over their mistakes and moving on to bigger and better. It's tough for celebrities, right? Because they're out in the public and they do something stupid and they're forever remembered. But certainly within the minority community and folks that don't have the context around this, we forgive folks very quickly. Certainly we're not excusing the issues of controversy, what he did, or other people. And boy, we should talk about the O.J. Simpson trial. That was a great example of that.
Yes.
And not just justifying O.J. by any means, but it was a cultural divide on how folks reacted after that, and certainly with Kobe Bryant as well. But we wanted to talk about that because it's an obvious topic. As I've looked on social media, some people are still celebrating. Some people are like, I'm tired of this. There are folks who are like, why aren't we celebrating soldiers who died? And I totally get all that. But there's a lot around that, fortunately and unfortunately, with Kobe Bryant. And thanks for going in with me, ladies, on that.
Sure.
So, well, we have Moms Demand Action here, an advocacy group here locally and nationally that deals with the issue of gun violence. Ladies, tell us your name so I won't goof up on it.
My name is Donna Miller.
Donna,
I live in Rochester.
My name is Alicia Aiken, and I live just outside of Rochester.
My name is Liz Golden, and I live in Rochester.
Okay. Well, ladies, tell us about Moms Demand Action. I know when I met you guys as an organization, what, a month ago, whatever, I'm like, what? They're in Rochester? Tell us about who you are and what you do.
Yeah. So Moms Demand Action is a grassroots army of volunteers that work to prevent gun violence of all types all throughout our country. They're, like you said, we're a national organization. We have millions of members, and we have a really largely growing state group as well. Our Rochester group started in what year? Donna Miller started it. Do you remember?
Probably in 2016.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's fairly new.
Thank you for starting that.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it's because I opened my mouth at a forum that Kim Norton had.
What did you go and do that for?
Yeah, right. But I feel like our group has just exploded. I mean, we have our consistent membership is the numbers are incredible compared to even when I got started a couple of years ago. We call ourselves mothers and others. You don't have to be a mom or a woman or binary to be a member or a volunteer. And Liz and I were talking about this. I think I would say it's not an exaggeration to say at most of our meetings, at least 1/3 of the people in the room are men.
Oh, wow.
Maybe even 50% at times, and they're not men whose wife or significant other dragged them there. Like they're coming by themselves, and many of them are gun owners. And I think that says a lot about the issue too. Yeah, so we fight for common sense gun legislation like background checks and red flag laws.
Wow, so you guys are taking on a very controversial issue.
Yeah. Well, it's controversial and it's not. I mean, the legislation that we are working towards and fighting for is supported by the vast majority of Minnesotans.
Okay.
And even a plurality probably of gun owners.
Right.
So there's controversy around the topic a little bit, but what we're advocating for really isn't controversial.
Right.
It's just common sense. Things that most people agree on, actually.
Really? Wow. And okay, I'm gonna play devil's advocate here, and you guys can beat me up later.
Yeah.
But I know folks are thinking these things, and obviously we try to keep it 100 in the barbershop. Someone said this, and I can't remember who. Maybe it was President Obama. I'm just gonna throw it out there, but guns in our culture is a religion, and to upend or find balance with that issue is very difficult because guns, is it the Fifth Amendment? Second Amendment. Show them ignorance. It's a religion in our culture. I mean, from movies to all kinds of things, and it stemmed from a great a reason back in the day when they were fearful of the government coming in and blah blah blah.
Sure.
What do you think about that whole thing?
So I do think that guns are a really important part of our culture, and I think we could, if we had 3 days to talk about this, we could dissect that even more and talk about masculinity and toxic masculinity.
That's right.
But if we want to just hit the top of it, I do think guns are important in our culture. We have guns in my home. We're not anti-gun as an organization, and I think it's important to make the distinction between gun extremists and like normal hunters and normal gun owners. So the gun extremists are the ones who you see on TV and you see in Virginia, kind of opposing this common sense gun legislation. But poll after poll shows, even here in Minnesota, that the majority of gun owners do support the things that we're fighting for. And so I think I think it's just an example of like all the misinformation, and people read a headline and then they believe that, right? But when we sit down with them and explain what we want, they're like, well, yeah, of course we should do that. Or some gun owners even think that the things we're fighting for have already happened and are already laws.
Right.
And so, so I think a lot of it is misinformation.
Okay, so I'm going to know some of the statistics that you all sent me, and astounding when I first read these about a month ago. All right, and let me know if I get them wrong, but these are stats from Minnesota, and I think it's every town.
Yep.
The organization has got these, made up these stats. Okay, and then we'll pivot off of these stats. Firearms are the second leading cause of death for children and teens in Minnesota. And then black children and teens are 4 times as likely as their white peers to die of guns. What's up with that, ladies?
Correct. So I just want to clarify that information was compiled by Everytown, which is our umbrella organization.
Okay.
But it came from the CDC fatal injury reports.
Okay.
So I just want people to know that.
Solid info.
Yeah, we didn't make them up. But yeah, I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah, so I think, and those are true stats, and it's alarming. It's, part of, it's why we are doing this work is, we want our kids to be safe. And I think we can't talk about this issue without talking about racism. It's intertwined as it's intertwined with everything.
Right.
But that stat of, the leading cause of death for black children is alarming.
How, and this is my ignorance. I grew up in the hood, blah, 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 Indianapolis, Indiana. Guns were huge, problem with guns, so on and so forth. But it never dawned on me this is a second leading cause of death for children. What are they,
I know.
What's up with that?
It's crazy. It even surprises our pediatrician volunteers.
Right.
It surprises our pediatric nurse volunteers.
Right.
I think it's something that isn't talked about a lot. And I think part of the reason it's kind of been hidden is because in the past the NRA has done a really good job of not allowing, really good research and frankly, as a country, we haven't looked at this as a public health crisis, and that's really what it is, right? Like, let's say there's a disease that was the leading cause of death for children or black children and teens. Like, I think we'd be studying it a lot more than we are gun violence, but we have these high-paid lobbyists fighting against it. That is starting to change, and I think we'll see some real progress. But yeah, it's like when I first got involved and read that statistic, that's the second leading cause of death for all kids and teens and the first leading cause of death for black children and teens. Like, that is a disgustingly alarming statistic.
Crazy.
And we should all be up in arms about it, right?
Absolutely.
And now in Minnesota, it's the leading cause of death for all children and teens in our state. More than car accidents, more than cancer, more than heart disease. Guns. Leading cause of death of children in our state in Minnesota. So it's a problem. It's a problem.
Wow, let's stay there. 37% of gun deaths or homicides in Minnesota. Black people are 10 times likely to die of gun homicide as their white counterparts. Wow, right? And we kind of know this, but this speaks in a very broad way of this. What can be done to stop this? And I think this is where the controversy gets in. What can stop gun violence as it relates to our inner city, our minority kids, and what have you?
So that's a big question.
Right.
And so maybe we'll just talk about a couple of the things that we are working towards, bills that we are fighting for in the Minnesota legislature. One of those is universal criminal background checks.
Okay.
So when somebody wants to purchase a gun or a firearm, there should be a background check. And
Right.
that should happen whether you buy the gun in a gun store or online or at a gun show or wherever you purchase that gun. There should be a background check if a person wants to own a deadly weapon.
So currently, last year in Minnesota, or 2 years ago now, there were over 28,000 ads on the internet for selling firearms in our state that would not have required a background check on that sale. And so it's really easy for people who are planning to harm themselves or others to get a firearm. So I think that needs to be the first thing. People say like, oh, they'll get the gun on the black market, and there's no need for there to even be a black market right now in Minnesota because it's so easy to get a gun.
Right.
So that's the first thing, right? Everyone needs a criminal background check. And then the second thing is, like the oversaturation of guns is the difference between our country and other countries. We have,
no question.
Right? And so, so we have to think about like, how are these guns getting here? And of course, there are laws on the books that we can continue, that we probably need to enforce more. That's one thing that I think we agree with our opposition on. There are a lot of gun laws that currently just aren't being enforced as much as they should.
Right.
But city gun violence is a problem, and we're lucky that here in Rochester it's not a big problem, but we have seen an uptick in shooting.
We are starting to see that, yeah.
And we're seeing the same racial statistics, right?
Absolutely.
So it's definitely
People of
something.
color.
Yes. So it's definitely something that we've been talking to our police chief about and meeting with other community leaders about. I don't know exactly what the answer is, but I do know that we're working on trying to figure that out, and that's one of our state goals too. We know that the gun violence in Minneapolis is a big problem, and that's one of our state leadership's goals is to really work on that this year too.
One of the things that people are advocating is taking away guns. One of the presidential candidates, and I'm forgetting his name, is no longer there, from Texas, El Paso.
Beto. Yeah.
And understandably so. When he said this statement, he was after the tragic thing that happened in El Paso, there, his hometown. But basically, he said we're going to take away guns.
Not all guns. He said assault weapons.
Assault weapons. There we go. You corrected me. So that obviously lit a fire, and I don't want to say conservative folks, but gun-loving folks.
Extremists.
Extremists. Okay. Well, let's keep it real. What do you think about that? I mean, that is either the fear or what one party will use to get folks out to vote, not for the other party. I didn't say which one. But what are your thoughts about that? You guys can say which one. I mean, I guess I could too. I'm just having fun here. But.
Sure.
Well, and I think maybe that's a good place to add that we are a nonpartisan organization. And so, I mean, you could say that there's one party that maybe right now is doing more of the work that we want to see happen.
Right.
But we would love for other parties to do the same.
Do the same.
Absolutely. So our group, especially our Minnesota chapter, we're not advocating any assault weapon bans. We're not advocating taking guns away from anyone. That's not something we're fighting for. We just want our two main focuses. Last legislative session, and these were passed in the House, and we're going to be fighting for them again starting in a few weeks or next week. Next week. Wow. Like we talked about the background check on every single gun sale, and then red flag laws, which is a tool that law enforcement is asking for to give them like a tool to remove guns from someone who they know is going to be a danger to themselves or others.
Right.
And that is a bill that has the support of pretty much every medical association in our state. It has the support of the Sheriff's Association, the Police Chiefs Association, and also the Peace Officers Association, so like the actual officers, the line. They think it will make their job safer too.
And this is the information that's not getting out there.
Agree.
And in our misinformation, fake news, whatever it is, era where we willingly will not put the truths out there, that stuff is not getting out there.
Agreed.
And that's huge information to let, whatever party you, great. Everybody's trying to get some sensible stuff going on.
Yep. Agree. And I feel like if all of the experts that are dealing with gun violence are asking for this, come on, and the majority of Minnesotans and the majority of gun owners, I mean, I think it's part of the reason we feel like we're not going to ever give up this fight, because can you think of any other issue that like over 90% of Minnesotans agree on? They agree that we should have background checks, and they agree that we should have red flag laws. So this is a no-brainer, and we feel like the tide has turned. It's just a matter of time before our legislators either lose their job because they don't catch up with voters, or they change their mind and catch up with voters.
Well, let's go to a keep it real piece here, and we're hitting that anyways. But so is it not culture, but money that's driving this? Because again, money. I mean, man. I mean, I'm running for office. I got this lock, man. You about to get me in office? Blah blah blah. Boom. And we see it in a lot of different areas, conspiracy theory. But will it never change? Because the money's good.
So I think, and this is my personal opinion, not as a Moms Demand Action spokesperson. I think that, although Shannon wants to probably agree, I think the NRA is crumbling. The NRA leadership is toxic and awful, and I think the NRA members, support the kind of legislation we want, but their leadership is just awful. And so I think that the NRA members are starting to see this, and I think that their whole organization is crumbling. I don't think they have the money that they used to have. I don't think they have the political clout that they used to have.
Right.
But yeah, it's gross, but yeah, a lot of it is about money, right? Like we wouldn't have the well-organized organization we have without money either. We're lucky that we have a billionaire who has supported a lot of our organizational work. So yeah, it's gross, but yeah, a lot of it is about money.
It is about, and it's kind of scary when you follow the money, as they say.
Yeah. Well, just to say, I think there is absolutely momentum with this. We're seeing that locally, we're seeing that nationally with, movements and things that have happened. We look at Virginia and the laws that are, things that are happening down there. There is momentum and it's shifting and changing. And I think something to think about is, as we said, this is supported by the vast majority of Minnesotans, gun owners and not, police organizations and whatnot. I think it bears asking if those who represent you are not following what their constituents want, are really representing you, why is that? I think we should be asking that question of those people who are not.
And believe me, we do.
Yes.
We do, because it's
I
crazy.
think everybody should.
Agreed. Yeah.
So what do you say to this? Obviously African Americans, given the disenfranchisement of African Americans throughout history, blah, 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 obviously the state being an overarching authority on Black Americans, Native Americans as well, mistrust of government. This kind of goes back to obviously other folks as well. A lot of folks are like, or could be, wait a minute, you're trying to, and I'm being the devil's advocate, take away my guns, and then the state gets to keep their guns. These folks have lynched and blah, 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 my people for years, and there's a lot of sentiment around that, not just culturally. I am not about to give up my gun or go with all this blah, blah, blah stuff.
Yeah.
If they're packing heat, I'm going to pack heat. What do you think to that?
So, I think if we think about just America, we hear that from a lot of, white gun extremists as well. Like, you can't take my gun. I think the government now has tanks and fighter jets. And so your gun, the truth is your gun's not going to protect you from the government. I think, I do, if you talk about the Black community and people of color in the minority community, like they have a different reason to want to protect themselves, right? And so I think as an organization, and we just made our goals for our local group, this is something we're really, really going to try to focus on this year. And, when you talk about like, why does gun violence impact Black children more? And why are Black women much more likely to die by gun violence than white women? We all know that there's like this systemic racism that we have to really work to dismantle. And so what does that look like? A lot of it might look like us going into our school and making sure that like my school, my small town school is doing some actual Black history education throughout the year, and they're actually doing it in a good way, right? So I think there's a lot of things that we can do even that don't look just like gun violence prevention that really will hopefully start to move the needle a little bit. Right.
Well, you hit on a topic. I want to hit two more stats that are pretty huge as it relates to gun violence. We hit the cultural piece, that will kind of be interwoven through all of this, but there are two other topics that are huge. 58% of female IPH victims, that is, IPH is?
Intimate partner violence.
Okay.
So like domestic violence.
Domestic violence. 58% are killed with a gun. We see this. Black women are 2 times as likely as their white counterparts to be fatally shot by a gun. Domestic violence is huge everywhere. We see it at the public defender office. What do you say to that issue as well?
I think this is where red flag laws come into play. If that would be an avenue for guns to be removed from the home if it's known that a person is likely to be or going to be a danger to themselves or to others. And so I think that could prevent some of this.
Right.
Absolutely. Another thing that we really need to improve on in our county is currently if you're a convicted domestic abuser, under current Minnesota law, that makes you a prohibited gun owner, which means your guns should be confiscated under current law. I don't think that's happening consistently in our county, and that's something we're going to continue to advocate for. I think our commissioners need to give the police department money for an officer that can actually do that. The police know how to do it, and they know how to do it safely. It's not a fun part of their job, but it's not being done consistently, and that's a problem.
Huge,
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
huge. The other topic is, and I say this in this, guys, and it's very important. I think about a month or two ago, a stat came out that black teens, I think it was male teens, but black teens suicide's going up. And the question is why? The black teen suicide is going up, and I think there was another stat saying we as Americans have more, our digital phones, our depression is up, mental health is up, and then suicide is awkwardly up. 61% of gun deaths are via suicide. 87% of all victims are white, and as we've talked about culturally, blacks and guns, this is one area culturally where it's more within the Euro-American side of things. Can we go there on that one? Why is that?
Absolutely. So we know that access to a gun increases the risk of suicide by, I think it's like 10 times. And in our area, in Olmsted County, the largest amount of gun violence is gun suicide, and it's mostly older white men that are ending their lives with a gun. I think it's just access to a gun. So we know that if you have a suicide attempt with a firearm, you are much more likely to have that attempt end in death.
Right.
So it's something like over 95% or something of all suicide attempts with a firearm end in death. And only a small fraction of suicide attempts by any other means end in death.
Right.
And most of the people that survive a suicide attempt do not go on to commit suicide, which is a common misconception. And so if we can keep guns away from people in that time of crisis, most of those people won't go on to try to end their lives. And so
something, a piece of information that stuck with me, shared by the pediatrician that is in our local group, was that, and I'm not going to remember the number of seconds, but people who attempt suicide with a firearm share that the amount of time that they think about, the time between when they think about it and do it is very short.
It's like a few minutes, I think it was.
It's a very short period of time. So if they have access to a firearm during that short period of time, it's very much more likely it will end in death.
Right.
If there's not access to a gun during that time, they get past that crisis period, and then
what you say is absolutely right, because I've been trained as a suicide interventionist, and the data over several decades has showed that the access to guns has become easier and easier, and there was a time when suicide by gun was the rarest form of suicide, and now it is the most common, and it just makes sense that when access to guns is easier and easier, whether mostly through illegal channels, not legal channels.
I think, it's really hard to get specific gun death statistics. It's hard at our last, one of our events we had, there was a very famous Mayo Clinic researcher who asked me for data because he couldn't find it. He's world famous. We have a local elected, one of our state house legislators, she was unable to find data. It's really hard to find. And the only way we were able to get it is by reaching out to the Southeastern Minnesota Medical Examiner's Office. And in their report, we learned that in 2017, there were 5 firearm suicides in Southeastern Minnesota. And in 2018, there were 18.
Wow.
So in 1 year, we went from 5 to 18. And I know that doesn't sound like, wow, an outrageous number, but that's 13, those are 18 lives that were lost. Those are 18 families that were affected. And we've heard a lot of talk about farmers being in distress, and there was a young farmer from Pine Island who within the year went on Facebook and was talking about the financial hardship that they're having, and he referenced how suicide is on the rise among the farming community, and those are households that we know are gun owners, right? Like they need them to kill varmints and other things too, right? So I think that's another area where we hope to focus some work is on our gun safety. We have a program called Be Smart that Ann Sukamel, who's in the audience, is our Be Smart lead. Yes. And it's a gun safety program, and we do touch on suicide prevention. It also talks about, like, for example, if you're going to a play date, the importance of asking if there are unsecured guns in the home when you go on a play date.
That's keeping it real right there. Hey,
Yeah.
the play date.
I know.
Are you packing heat?
Conversation.
Yeah,
I know,
exactly.
but unnecessary one.
No, it's true, and so
Wow.
I mean, there aren't a lot of things that make me like, you know, I'm not a very timid person, but that was even hard for me. But I just started texting it to people, and now I just ask them, like, when we
Straight
talk about
up, you
food,
say,
I'm like,
hey, little Susie and Johnny's
Yeah.
coming over. You
Yeah.
got some guns up in there?
yeah,
That's
I
right.
do, And when kids come to my house, I
Wow.
say we have a firearm, but it's secured, and the ammunition is stored separately, because I think it's
Have we gone
important
that
to
far in
normalize.
America? And I know the answer is yes. But
Oh,
have we?
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it
Because the
normalizes
facts
it.
tell
Right?
us that,
Yes.
you know, kids know where those guns are,
Mhm.
and you can tell kids, don't touch that gun, they're gonna touch the gun.
Yeah.
Because they're curious.
Yes.
And
You can't
turn
any
curiosity
information
out
you
of
give
kids.
them does
Exactly.
not.
But what about those folks who are saying and respectfully said, wait a minute, back in the day I took a little Susie and Johnny out, we shot a deer and blah blah blah, and we taught them to respect guns, and that's all you gotta do.
Yeah.
Like, introduce them to it early, and then they'll respect guns, and boom boom boom.
So we base all of our opinions on data and research, and there's
Oh, why would you do
Yes,
that?
I know, and there are some really good studies that show that if you take a group of, I think it was a group of 5-year-olds, the most recent one, and they gave them very intense gun safety training every single day for, like, you know, a week or two. And then at the end, they put those kids in the room with a gun and 5-year-olds who had received no gun safety training. Every single child, whether they went through the gun safety training or not, walked up to the gun and pulled the trigger. Because, like Liz said, you can't train the curiosity out of the kid.
Ooh, did y'all
So,
hear that?
yes.
Ooh,
So the
that's
thing,
interesting.
yeah, so, you know, I mean, I think it's important to do all those things about gun safety training, and I do that with my own kids, but you can't rely on that,
Right.
right? So,
Interesting.
yeah, you have to keep everything locked
You
up.
have to be the adult.
Yes, you have to keep things locked up.
Keep them locked up. They can't just keep it in the little nightstand.
No.
Or,
And you know, if you feel like you need to have easy access like that, there's such good technology now. You can open a fingerprint lockbox more quickly than you can your nightstand drawer. So if you feel
what
like you
about
need
our at-risk, impoverised minority
Yeah.
communities? I can't afford no
I know.
$1,000
And then
nightstand.
you come and see us, and we'll give you a trigger
Yeah,
lock. We'll give
okay.
you a trigger lock.
Okay,
yes.
there we. Hey, you
Yes,
hear
and
that?
trigger
Okay,
locks
good.
cost, you know, a few bucks. So there's a lot of options that aren't. But yes,
Okay.
no, you're exactly right. Like
Mhm.
that's
Okay. Let me get you on another controversial topic, and then we'll kind of close here in a little bit. And I asked this in two ways, from a cultural standpoint and a mental health standpoint. You mentioned, as it relates to suicides, Euro-American white men are having a problem. Another area, statistically, we could see where this is going, I think it correlates, is the mass shootings. That is huge among white men. A lot of folks in our community are asking, why in the heck are we not calling it that? We're calling it domestic terrorism, but we're not saying, hey, our white men are having a problem. And then that's where I go with the mental health standpoint. If we don't recognize, kind of like the AA thing, I'm an alcoholic, and then you can move forward into dealing with that issue. If we don't say white men have a problem with blowing up folks, and I say that respectfully and not
no,
to,
it's the truth.
how can we heal the problem? If we all domestic terrorism, blah blah blah.
No, it's a big problem, and we know that if it was black men and
Oh,
black
it'd be,
boys
oh
doing
man, I wouldn't be here today.
I
They'd
mean,
jail
it'd be-
all of
yes,
us.
no,
Yeah.
it's awful, and we also know that the things that like what's correlated with these white men and white boys doing the shootings are domestic violence, misogyny, and racism,
Right, right.
and sometimes white supremacy, right?
Right,
so
right.
like these are things that are a problem.
Right, right.
And so we need to address those, right? And I think, I love that you asked that question, because I absolutely agree we need to be talking about that more. And like you said, we need to be calling it what it is. We need to be labeling these murderers, and like labeling the hate, you know, and I think it's important to distinguish between mental illness and mental health. Like clearly they have mental health issues, but mental illnesses like schizophrenia, bipolar, like most of these shooters don't have actual mental illness.
Right.
And so when people like our president talk about mental illness in conjunction with them, it just stigmatizes mental illness. And people with actual mental illness are much more likely to be victims of gun violence than to be the perpetrators.
Right.
So I think what we need to start talking about is these boys are often racist, they're often misogynist, and they often have a lot of anger problems and have a lot of hate issues. And so that's what we need to be talking about.
Well, how do you address this issue? And did you have something to say there?
Okay.
I think this is massively huge, and a lot of people talk about this. And unfortunately, it's being promoted from the highest offices in our land. But as it relates to Euro-American men, and this is my opinion, there's this perception that America is going away. We're losing our country, blah, blah, blah. Tag it on however you tag it. And it even goes way back in the history of our country where, post-slavery, oh no, white nationalism, blah, blah, blah. And give it that tag or not. But it seems like, and I mean this from a mental health standpoint too, not just a racial one, we're losing our America. And guess what, damn it, that ain't happening on my watch, blah, 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 blah. And then we get these reactions, I think, because people think, and we've seen it. New York just had the, I don't want to go over all the shootings, but how do we address that issue? I think people are honestly thinking they're losing their America. And even here in our liberal Minnesota, we saw the last election how a lot of folks, I think, voted almost, and I'll be very careful on who, in response to we're losing our America, blah, blah, blah. How do we address it? Because I think that's a huge issue.
It's a racism issue.
It's a racism issue. But somehow we have to let these folks know, you're not losing your America. This is America. I mean, it's embedded in our Constitution and who we are. How do we do that? I think that is absolutely key because we will see, and this is, I think, where a lot of African Americans and minorities are absolutely petrified. Depending on what happens in 2020 November, you all might have, as gun advocates, you might see an uptick in this issue if certain parties get in because they're scared.
So a piece of this, I think, part of that is a tactic by those in power who want to keep a stranglehold on that power.
Right.
And are afraid they're losing their power.
Right.
And a tactic of that is for them to keep their power is to divide everybody else.
Right.
So fear and hatred and division, because if you all are fighting amongst yourselves down there, you're not going to come after my power.
Right.
I think we need to call that out.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It's a scary time. In particular, when people incite, they may be being nice or riling up the troops or whatever. But what they don't realize, there are some folks with some mental health issues or just whacked out issues. I did say whacked out.
Yeah.
Who will actually take that information, grab a gun, and go shoot a lot of people.
So I think I think part of it, like obviously this is a racism, right? So like how do we get through to basically like the white men who don't want to hear it. I mean, and the white women who don't want to hear it, right? How do we collect these white people that won't hear it? And so I think part of it is figuring out a way to talk to them. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I've noticed, like, even when I speak to my friends about it, who are often very smart people, maybe not the most open-minded people in the world, but they, once they hear the words like white privilege or even hear the word racism, it's like this wall goes up and they won't even continue the conversation. And so I have tried to just be very careful in the words I use and have the conversation, but without labeling it, because white fragility is real and it's messed up, but it's there. And so like if we want to actually get through to people, sometimes you have to, in my experience, and I don't know if this is right or wrong, like I am trying, I could be completely misstepping, right? But you have to almost like package it, right? So they'll listen to start to get through, and then hopefully eventually our conversations will be more frank and we can start labeling things for what they are. And because I do think it's really important to call things what they are, but if calling things what they are puts a wall up, like then we're not making progress, right?
I agree, and I think that's work that we as
Yes.
white women need to own and do and
Yes.
continue.
Right,
to do.
right.
Because
Yes.
let's be real, white women is a large part of the reason that we are where we are in this
Right.
country right now.
No question, no
And
question.
so I absolutely agree.
And
with
you guys
that.
are, and I'll say this to keep it real, you guys are the best beneficiaries of
Oh.
the civil rights movement.
For sure.
So you guys
Oh,
got
for sure,
power
yeah.
to get a
We do,
lot of
yeah.
stuff done. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we need to use that in a good
Right,
way,
right.
right? So
Mm.
like we have that and we need to use it
Mhm.
to make growth, to move the needle and somehow try to figure out a way to give it to the people that don't have it. And, we all say these things, but like, what does that look like
Right.
in real life? Like
Mhm.
when the painter shows up to my house with a Confederate flag sticker in his window, does it mean I tell him, you're not painting in my house? Or does it mean I invite him in and try to have a conversation, right? Like,
Right,
what
right.
does that look like?
That's right.
It's, yeah.
And I want to make sure that I note this, particularly coming from Donovan Bailey and Barbershop Talk. Certainly racism is all over this. But we have to recognize as a social worker, and I work in mental health, blah, 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 via the public defender office, that our Euro-American young men are having issues, and men, obviously suicide via gun, and then this issue of mass shootings via gun. And we need to take a mental health lens on that to help our fellow American men to change this issue. I don't know how you do it. I'm not a mental health professional, but I think obviously we need to admit that it's happening. And then two, we need to say, okay, what are we going to do? Because no one wants a mass shooting. I don't care if they're white, black, or purple, of many citizens. But until we call it out what it is, instead of domestic terrorism, blah, 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 scoop, or this individual had mental health issues, whatever, I think we got a scary problem on our hands.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So question for you guys as we get out of here, and thank you so much for showing up. How can we get more folks involved with you all? And this question, we're having some discussions on this yesterday. How do we get more diverse folks
Yes, thank you.
involved with you?
Yes.
And it's a tough question. It is
No,
what it is,
That's the right
but
question.
It is.
given minorities are disproportionately affected by the bang bang, what can we do to get more folks into your organization?
It is the right question, and we just talked about, we talk about it often, but yeah, we are mostly, we're almost all white people in our group, mostly white women, and does that mean we're not making space for people of color, for Black people? It might mean that African Americans and people of minorities are already doing this work and have been for decades. They're just not getting on the news when they
Absolutely,
be,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
we know that's part of it. And so I guess if you would like to join us, we would love to have anyone join us. And to join us, you can text the word join to 64433. So there's that. But as far as getting, so we don't, I guess I want to be clear that we don't expect Black people and people of color to educate us about this or to do the work. Like,
Right.
there's plenty of work. I mean,
Yep,
the fact
it's
that
there.
you're even here doing this is incredible,
Right.
right? Like,
Thank you. Yeah.
it is, and thank you for having us on and having us follow Governor Walz is pretty.
Yeah.
I mean,
You guys. I mean, I think you're doing your thing.
we are
but
big
yeah.
time. We
Yeah,
feel so
yeah.
big time. No, but I think part of what our goals for the year include a lot of outreach and just showing up, right? Like
right.
showing up at events that are hosted by Black people and people of color, and doing what we can to support other organizations and try to answer those questions.
Great.
We recognize that we need to listen, be
Yes.
open to hearing.
Right.
Yes.
And we need, and you're not the only entity that's struggling with this, and we applaud you for what you're doing. But we are seeing this issue with guns going, well, in our third largest city way, going nuts in our area. And I think one of the challenges we have as we grow to be this great DMC, blah, 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 that's not only affecting Rochester, but the region and all of South Minnesota. How do we become proactive? And I fear that the money's so good, we're not thinking about being proactive. We're building and doing and blah, blah, blah. And we'll deal with all the repercussions later. And unfortunately, that might be some bad things.
Yeah, and we, that's something that when we meet with, especially our law enforcement, our local law enforcement electeds, we talk about that. How can we prevent things like the Philando Castile shooting? Like, how are we preventing things like that from happening here?
Right.
But also, do we have the infrastructure, and how can we help advocate for the infrastructure
Right,
to
right.
even have, to be able to support the growth, right? I agree, we need to be proactive, and
And let's get you out with this controversial one. You reminded me. You shouldn't have reminded me. Obviously, within our African American communities, Philando Castile and others, I see video all the time. Black folks, minorities are scared of cops with guns. And we have evidence throughout our nation that this is an issue. Chief Franklin is doing a great job in trying to do some things, and Sheriff Torgerson. What can be done there? Because that is gun violence. Right?
Absolutely.
But it's licensed, and we were talking about this yesterday, and we were actually going over the law. Dee Sobel and Dr. Shark-Kunkel were leading us in this conversation, but the law's so ambiguous that if I, as a cop, and I was a former cop, shoot you in the line of blah, 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 scoop, I cannot be, held accountable because the law gives me a lot of fluctuation. What about this phase of gun violence? Because that, black folks are like, you want to talk about gun violence?
Yes.
Talk about the legal gun violence.
Yes. So we do try to keep most of our meetings private, but I'll tell you this: when we met with Chief Franklin, that was the majority of what we talked about with him.
Right.
So we tried to meet with him as soon as we could when he was when he started his job as chief, and that was our first order of business. And we continue to ask him about that every time. And we only have so much power, unfortunately. But I think holding leadership's feet to the fire is the first step.
Right.
But then the second step is, how do we make sure that, it would be really hard to have a complete force without having a problematic officer, right?
Right.
So how are we holding those officers accountable? Because they're showing their colors earlier than there's actually a shooting incident.
Right.
So like their co-officers know if they're racist, or if they have implicit biases that they're completely unaware of and are unwilling to work on or talk about. So
that's a culture of a police department is set at the top.
Right. And I think Jim Franklin, I know definitely coming in new, is really starting with some cutting edge things.
Good.
So and I think one of the things he's doing, I think all law enforcement agencies have been, and I could be wrong, but I think they have been required to do some type of cultural competency, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Are you all getting in on that? I mean, in the sense of what you do?
Yeah, so our organization gives our leadership, we actually had at our last leadership retreat last year, this was before Liz came on board, but there was a young woman from the Metro who volunteered her time graciously and gave us, we wanted to this, and I think all the leadership did, we basically took a test. And then she told us the results, and it was eye-opening, right? Like you think that it was eye-opening, and I learned so much, and it was so humbling, and so then it gave me like some direction as a leader of the group to try to figure it out. But it's something that I think we'll always continue to work on. Like that work is never done, and so we need to always be like kind of introspective and making sure that we're leading by example.
Right.
But we can't hold people like Chief Franklin accountable if we're not doing the work within our group.
Right.
But I don't know. It's something we are continually working on, and we do hope that if anybody in the public sees us misstepping, like we want you to tell us, like we want to be called out, and we want to be doing better. So if anyone sees us misstepping, please don't ever hesitate to let us know.
Right. And it's good. I want you all to know, and hopefully you caught it. You all are balancing your perspective as it relates to gun violence. It is an issue, and I want to make sure all people know. We're not saying no one should have a gun, or if I'm speaking for you, blah blah blah, so on and so forth. And don't misconstrue it that way. I think it sounds like we're trying to save lives, make sure our country is protected. You guys are not anti-law enforcement, right?
No.
Boom. Not anti-law enforcement. None of that stuff. So I want to make sure we emphasize that, because obviously in our age of misinformation, or trying to get misinformation, folks who misconstrue things, the next thing you know, you as leaders are, they're anti-gun and they want to take care of blah, blah, blah. Yeah. No, we're talking about a sensible America, right? And a sensible Rochester, am I right? Or am I getting lost? Okay, good. And I just wanted to emphasize that, all right, for you, my friends out there who are like, these folks are crazy. Well, maybe so, but not. we might be, but we're talking about a better place to live, you with your gun, and hopefully balancing things out. So I just wanted to make sure we knew that. As we go, ladies, we try to motivate our young folks out there, or other folks. You three are ladies, four ladies, are people of accomplishment and leaders in this community, whether you know it or not. And there are some young ladies, particularly, but young men as well. They can't see themselves as leaders. Do you have any encouraging words to those folks?
Yes, you can do it. You
can
do
do
it,
it.
and we need you to do it. And we need you to do it. And so we actually have an opportunity available. We don't have a local Students Demand Action group.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah, so if there's anyone that wants to help get one going, we have all the resources. We can help you do that. You could be as active or as non-active as you want. It doesn't need to be a giant commitment, but we would love to help you get that going.
Right.
And we have state leadership for Students Demand Action that will help.
Yes.
Help you.
Yeah, and I think especially, we need you. We need you, young kids. We need you. You are so smart and you are so impressive, and we need you.
Right.
Yes.
And Doris, right?
Donna.
I was close.
That's all right.
My bad. It still has five letters in it, right, Doris?
It
Donna?
does.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Almost.
Thank you for being bold enough to start this.
Yes,
It's amazing stuff. We appreciate you being a pioneer.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's Barbershop Talk. Saturday,
Bye.
we'll have Dr. LaPrincess Brewer in a couple of weeks. We'll see you then.